Hey Bill, thanks for your time the other day. So let's just go through your Kvest findings. Uh, the swing on the left and the center are your good hits, and this one in blue is your miss hit. Now these lines look pretty similar, but what we can say is that there's a stable pattern in your good swings. And the stable pattern is related to the sequencing and when each segment hits its top acceleration. So for you, your hips peak second, your torso peaks first, and your hands peak third. So it looks like this. So this is your backswing. This is as you start the downswing, and your torso peaks milliseconds first, hips peak second, hands peak third. Your miss hit, it changes just a little bit, and we'll go over why that changes, but it's the other way around. Hips peak first, torso second, hands third, and milliseconds apart again. What we can say is this is generally considered like the PGA norm, and this is like what's considered the most efficient sequence. However, this is your miss hit. This is your best contact by far. And the fact that it's milliseconds apart, the peak timing or peak accelerations, we're not going to get too hung up on that. But we can say that we've observed this, and this is kind of a stable pattern for you. To transition, when you which segment starts the downswing changes a little bit. But again, these lines sort of tell us that there isn't too much of a change. And again, it's milliseconds apart. What we talked about last day was that the biggest thing that seems related to a miss hit is something that starts at address for you. And that is the amount of bend you have at address. So, we talked about this before, is that when you stand taller, you make better contact. Your upper body bend for a good contact, in this case was 27, upper body was 33, and a poor contact was 40. Now this is saying that this is in the right zone of like 40 to 45 degrees is closer to the high side, but that's poor contact for you. What we focused on was the hips. So for you, your hip bend is the high end of normal, and a miss hit is definitely too much. So what we talked about was trying to get the pelvis to closer to around maybe 20 degrees of pelvic bend, and keeping this number about the same is the best contact for you. The feedback you gave me was that this was better contact with the pelvic bend 25 degrees or lower and the pelvic bend hanging out around here. So what happens is that it starts to change your backswing right away. Your pelvis turn, or your hip turn, is around 7 degrees, which is more than the PGA range, but that's not a problem. 69 degrees, and in this instance, when you have a poor hit, it's 55 degrees. So it means that poor hit, more pelvis bend at address, which affects how much your pelvis or your hip turns back. So you have 55 degrees, so you turn your hips less far. And it also has a change in the upper body. Your upper body doesn't turn as far, it turns 79 degrees, whereas in this instance, it turns 89 degrees, and again, in this swing, it turns 91. So we know this also a relationship between more hip turn and more shoulder turn as a better contact for you. Those are the two big things we really keyed in on. We can look at all these other numbers, but that's really the takeaway here, is that that hip bend is what's most important at address, is it has a cascade of changes in your backswing. And let's just talk about some of the changes that happen in the backswing. So if we have too much hip bend, it generally makes it harder to disassociate or really load into the backswing a bit. We think about the new modern swing as a really restricted hip turn, or just really trying to get more of that X factor stretch that they're talking about. What we can say is that your miss hit is that when you start to decouple the torso from the hips, is that it comes later. So in this instance, your miss hit, it comes at 80 milliseconds. A good hit, it comes closer to 60 milliseconds, and on another good hit, it comes 60 milliseconds. We can see too that if we were kind of like look at the numbers in just a different graph, we can see that at 60 milliseconds is when all these lines separate. So this is when you start to really load the links or load the segments of your body. When in your miss hit, we're seeing this separation occur later. So extra arch in the pelvis, it's almost like it glues together your torso and your hips. And as you start that swing, they stay connected longer. And for you, the change is that you don't turn your shoulders as far as and hips as far as you usually do for your good contacts. So this separation, how all these lines spread out, is perfect. We really like that. We like how you generally transition the swing. Sometimes the numbers change a little bit, but it looks really good. So the take home is, when you have a flatter low back, or the hips have less bend at address, and you continue to sort of keep that same upper body bend that you like, which is on the around 33 degrees, that's when you make your best contact. When you have excess hip bend and you tip over more and your upper body is also bending over more, you're making poor contact, which is generally related to less hip turn, delayed disassociation between the hips and torso, and which is as a result ends with poor contact.